Kaliningrad, home of Russia's Baltic Fleet. Patriotism and military might are on display today, but there's a darker side to this very strategic port. But Kaliningrad is notorious as a smuggling hub for illicit cargo, and it's a transit route favoured by Russian gun runners. And it was here in July last year that the MV Arctic Sea pulled in for a series of secret modifications and repairs before setting out on its fateful voyage.
Contact with the cargo ship, the Arctic Sea, was lost almost 2 weeks ago. The vessel was bound for Algeria with a cargo of timber from Finland.
The mystery of the Arctic Sea is no closer.
When Russian TV first reported the Arctic Sea missing, rumours were already swirling that the vessel's cargo may have been something much more deadly than timber.
Time magazine is running a piece where it quotes numerous experts who suggest that Israel intercepted the ship as it carried secret weapons to the Middle East.
In a bid to find answers to this mystery of the high seas, I travelled not only to Russia, but also Latvia, Estonia, Malta, Belgium and Thailand. Russian authorities say the Arctic Sea left here in Kaliningrad on July the 16th, with 15 crew members on board. On July the 22nd, in Jakobstad, Finland, a load of timber was added to its hold. The intended destination for the timber was the port of Bajaya in Algeria. But instead, at 3 a.m. on Friday the 24th of July, the ship is boarded off the coast of Sweden by up to a dozen armed and masked men.
Men dressed in black with vests with police written on the back. They boarded the ship and were quite abusive to the crew and claimed to be narcotic traffic police and searched the ship. And then they left the ship without taking anything.
Whoever boarded the ship certainly weren't Swedish drugs police. The real Swedish police say that these men were fluent in English, but there's been no sign of them since. Rather than seek help for the crew, the ship's Russian owner merely orders the vessel to keep sailing. Russian investigative journalist Yulia Latinina finds the decision to resume course rather odd.
And it seems very strange because, well, if something like this happened to the vessel, it should have go to any port and dock there, and something should be done to the crew.
But Latinina says the crucial question is why it took 4 days for the incident to be reported to Swedish police.
The most important thing here is dates, because they don't add up. Because we have 24th, on which the vessel was hijacked. We have 28th, on which it was announced.
On that very day, July 28th, this completely routine encounter with the Arctic Sea was recorded by British maritime authorities as she passed through the English Channel.
Arctic Sea, this is David Coast Guard. Good afternoon to you, sir. Can we have your last port of call, over?
My last port of call, Jakobstad, Finland.
And your destination, sir, Bajaya?
Yes, it's correct.
How many persons on board?
15 crew members on board.
Any dangerous cargo, sir?
Negative, no dangerous cargo on board.
But also no mention of the mysterious boarding party that came and went, or that the crew may have been assaulted. Less than a day later, all contact with the Arctic Sea is lost.
It's a modern vessel with all the equipment on board. It can't sink without any trace, without alarm signals.
Maritime journalist Mikhail Voitenko is the man who broke the story of the Arctic Sea's disappearance.
Head on board, the kind of cargo we don't know anything about, some secret cargo. But some third party was ready to prevent this shipment by all means possible.
Voitenko made the decision to go public with his fears for the missing ship after being contacted by concerned family members. Voitenko was worried that if an attempt was made to cover up whatever may have been on board, the crew might also disappear.
In Arctic Sea story, I claimed from the very beginning, I said it loud and clear to Russian authorities, I am interested in crew only. You promise me that nothing would happen to crew, I promise you I'll cooperate with you. But they didn't ask.
Voitenko has now fled to Thailand. Not only was his offer of assistance ignored, but late one night he received a credible call saying that his life was in grave danger.
There are many contradictions in what pirates are saying, in what crew is saying, in what the law enforcement is saying.
Forced to respond after Voitenko's revelations, the Russian government announced that 5 destroyers and 2 nuclear submarines had been sent to search for the missing vessel. An extraordinary search effort for a ship carrying timber. And Voitenko smelled a rat. He began looking for the lost ship satellite tracker, the Automatic Identification System, or AIS.
Я иду на сайт АИС, вижу, вот он сигнал, да. 2 часа проходит, сигнал исчезает. Но я-то уже успел новость дать.
Hours after Voitenko posted news of the signal coming from the Bay of Biscay, French authorities made a peculiar announcement. The French declared that they had discovered Russian Navy signals coming from the same location. Voitenko says this is clear evidence of a cover-up.
Российские военные корабли имели физический контакт с судном гораздо раньше той даты, на которой было объявлено освобождение судна российскими военными. Что все последующее плавание судна, это уже плавание под контролем российских военных, в то время как все думали, что судно еще захвачено.
Товарищ, я вам давал поручение разобраться с нашим судном Arctic Sea. Что сделано, что можете доложить?
3 weeks after the incident off the Swedish coast, Russia's president, Dmitry Medvedev, consults with his defence minister in what many regard as a highly staged event.
Дмитрий Анатольевич, по вашему поручению был организован поиск этого сухогруза. И сегодня в час ночи по Москве оно было обнаружено в 300 милях от островов Зеленого мыса.
In fact, the Cape Verde Coast Guard had spotted the vessel days earlier, but this had been denied by Russia. From Cape Verde, the 8 supposed pirates were flown back to Russia, along with the crew. Although the alleged piracy had taken place in Swedish territorial waters, Russia claimed sole jurisdiction and laid piracy and kidnapping charges.
I don't believe that they hijacked the vessel. I don't believe it, absolutely.
То есть это человек, который ничего не знает. Я хочу сказать одно. Господину Войтенко я хочу порекомендовать меньше пить водки. Водка очень опасный продукт. Ее надо обязательно пить вот по чуть-чуть.
Astonishingly, Russia's ambassador to NATO, Dmitry Rogozin, freely admits that his government released false information as events unfolded.
Мы знали точно, что он не у Бискайского залива. Мы знали точно, что он уже у берегов Африки. Естественно, публично говорилось только то, что было необходимо для общественного мнения, чтобы успокоить ситуацию.
Cape Verde is still a kind of Russian subsidiary nation to a large extent. And so this is the only place in the Atlantic where Russia could operate from a land base and no one's going to ask them a lot of questions.
Moscow defence expert Pavel Felgenhauer is dubious of the Russian claims that they only caught up with the missing ship near Cape Verde.
Why would that ship be moving into the only place in the Atlantic where the Russians have an operational airbase and a foothold on land and a connection to use very heavy and transport planes, any kind of activity. Why would the hijackers move in that direction? I don't know. It looks very, very strange and very fishy.
Sort of операция прикрытия, as we say it in Russian, a cover-up.
After checking satellite tracking records, Yulia Latinina says that on previous voyages by the Arctic Sea, there were more mysterious movements.
It seems that Arctic Sea was in the habit of going to this particular Algerian port, and it was in the habit of switching off AIS immediately after it went through Gibraltar.
She also has no doubts about the nature of the ship's cargo.
These guys were delivering Russian arms. Who was exactly in charge, we don't know.
If there were Russian arms aboard the Arctic Sea, one theory is that it could have been the S-300 missile system. Pavel Felgenhauer says in 2009, Russian weapons traders had almost delivered on an S-300 deal with Iran.
The deal was going through. I mean, everything was already signed and agreed, all the paperwork done, and then it was frozen at the last moment by a personal decision by national leader, Prime Minister Vladimir Putin.
And Felgenhauer claims these traders are still trying to make a sale, even if they have to resort to smuggling.
Because there are still people in Russia who want to make a lot of money on the S-300 sale to Iran, and still some maybe still hope that they will get that money.
Russia's NATO representative Dmitry Rogozin says that's nonsense.
Россия не банановая республика, да? И мы осуществляем жесткий контроль за экспортом вооружений. Представить себе ситуацию, что мы, вопреки собственным правилам, своей логике, вот сейчас, в 21 веке, можем торговать или поставлять оружие, которое может быть использовано против Израиля, я не верю. Это анекдот.
The port of Valletta, Malta, is officially the Arctic Sea's home port, flying their flag of convenience. The ship eventually docked here in September 2009, a full month after the Russian interception.
I think definitely there was reticence on the part of the Russians to actually see the Maltese taking a more major role in the investigation. In fact,
Matthew Vella, editor of Malta Today, says that the Maltese maritime authorities initially launched their own investigation into the Arctic Sea's disappearance, but days later suddenly backed off. Once the Maltese officials eventually inspected the ship, they found nothing suspicious.
At the end of the day, all the Malta Maritime Authority had to do was carry out the basic checks, safety precautions, and that's it.
So it was almost like a rubber stamp, really.
Exactly. I don't think it had any reason to cause any trouble, as it were, to ask any embarrassing questions about what was happening on the ship.
Despite our repeated attempts, both the Malta Maritime Authority and the Minister for Transport sharply refused our requests for an interview. In the words of the press secretary to the Minister of Transport, the Arctic Sea remains a sensitive issue.
Потому что те доказательства, которые были первоначально собраны следствием, коллеги мои не дадут соврать, они все были собраны с нарушением закона.
In a crowded office in central Moscow, I've come to meet the lawyers for some of the Latvian and Estonian nationals accused of piracy. According to lawyer Omar Akhmedov, the evidence put forward by prosecutors is flimsy at best.
Все были косвенные улики и показания команды судна. Все. Причем показания команды судна тоже получались, вы знаете, что достаточно своеобразно. Их достаточно долго изолировали от общества. Вот.
The initial commanders have disappeared from the vessel very early.
Yulia Latinina not only questions the Russian prosecutor's case against the men being held in Moscow, she actually believes the Arctic Sea was boarded twice. The first time by special forces posing as Swedish police.
We can be sure that these were commanders who attacked the vessel, and we can be sure, well, practically sure that these were Israeli commanders.
So who were the alleged pirates arrested on board the Arctic Sea? From Moscow, I travelled 500 kilometres west to Maltese in Latvia. I've come to meet Lada Lepins, the wife of one of the accused, Vitaly Lepins.
Кто-то кого-то там подставил, это однозначно. Пираты откуда? Вы видели Малтез? Пираты откуда? Это сомалийские пираты, но здесь пираты с Малтеза. Нет.
Tallinn, Estonia is another unlikely home for three of the accused. The first pirates from the Baltic Sea in around 500 years. I've come to meet Alexei Bartonov. His brother Dmitry is another of the accused being held in a Russian prison.
Yeah, everybody was shocked, and we couldn't believe it that he could participate in such kind of hijacking story. Because
part of Russia's case against Dmitry is that he undertook military-style training in Latvia. But his brother says this was impossible, as Dmitry was already in trouble with the Estonian authorities and reporting to police daily.
Do you know what he was doing, what he was up to?
he was in Tallinn. All the time he was in Tallinn.
Безусловно.
Безусловно. Это 100%, потому что я вижу, я каждый день его видел ночью там, или я знаю, где он. Он не мог выезжать без разрешения своего надзирающего офицера из Таллина. То есть он никуда не уезжал.
Но он сказал, что есть новые работы.
Да, вот когда он получил новую работу, он сказал и уехал. Он получил разрешение.
That job, according to Alexei, was to provide security for some sea cargo. His brother was recruited by this man, Dmitry Savins, just a few days before the incident off Sweden. Back in Moscow, the lawyers for the other men tell the same story.
Дело в том, что по показаниям моего подзащитного, Виталия Липинса, значит, Савинс представил данную операцию как операцию, проводимую спецслужбами. Ему было указано, что их деятельность будет направлена на сопровождение морских грузов. Им была выдана форма, на которой было написано «Полис». Их предупредили никаких противоправных насильственных действий в отношении экипажа не применять.
Of the Arctic Sea, is it all about Israeli secret services?
Suspicions continue to surround the arrested so-called pirates. Many seasoned observers wonder whether they are just pawns in a complex intelligence operation.
They say that there's no other country that is more willing or more able to carry out a hijacking of this nature. It was professionally done, it was very well done. And then there's another question that also remains unanswered, a question that some people are asking: why did the Israeli President Shimon Peres visit Russia a day after the whole hijacking happened?
Just weeks after the ship was discovered, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also paid an unscheduled visit to Moscow. When his visit was finally revealed, Israel refused to comment. Pavel Felgenhauer says this meeting may have been critical for Israel's security.
It was a kind of secret visit, was organized at short notice. The actual discussion, we of course are not privy to, but the issues are clear. It's Russian arms sales to Iran, Russian arms sales to Syria, and what Israel can give Russia in exchange for not going through with some of those arms sales.
Out of immediate danger, Mikhail Voitenko continues to question what really happened to the MV Arctic Sea.
That means that the whole story about pirates hijacking was just a fake.
An illusion.
Yeah.
Illusion or not, there are still many secrets of the Arctic Sea yet to be revealed.